Chapter 1. Assigned to a man who smiles like he knows my secrets. Kairos had always believed he could survive the palace by mastering invisibility. Hidden behind pillars of scrolls in the imperial scribe chambers, he spent his days correcting the grammar of generals who barely knew how to write, and the philosophies of ministers who only pretended to understand them. His robes were always wrinkled, ink smudged his sleeves, and his hair, black, thick, and perpetually tousled, refused to stay tied. So when two imperial guards arrived outside the scribe wing with straight backs and unreadable faces, he didn't think they could possibly be here for him. "You," one said. "Kairos of the Western Wing?" He blinked. "Unfortunately. You are hereby summoned to serve under Commander Ren Ashtar." Silence fell in the chamber like a guillotine. Quills stopped mid-scratch. Even the scrolls seemed to hold their breath. Kairos blinked again. "Me? Did you mean Cairo? Chiron, the one from accounts? He's taller, very good at being unnoticed." The guards didn't blink. They didn't move. One stepped aside, the other gestured. "Now!" He barely had time to grab his satchel. As he was being marched through the corridor like a criminal, though the guards insisted he was being escorted, he whispered to himself, "This is how I die. They're taking me to be executed." Maybe someone finally noticed I corrected that prince's war speech. The halls grew colder and wider. The architecture sharpened, no longer wood-paneled and warm, but iron-laced, stone-floored, sunless. The wing was rarely used. Rumor said it belonged to the Emperor's shadow. A man whose smile had made entire provinces surrender. Commander Ren Ashtar. "Why me?" Kairos muttered. The guards didn't answer. When they stopped, the door was already open. It was a study. No, a war room. Strategically bare, but severe in presence. Maps lined the walls, corners pinned with gold-tipped daggers. No throne, just one high-backed chair that faced away from the entrance. And in it sat the man himself. Kairos had seen Ren once from a distance during a council assembly. He'd looked like a painting dipped in shadow. Now, up close, he looked even less human. Ren's black hair was pulled into a sleek cord, tied low at the nape of his neck. His face was pale, sculpted, severe. Eyes heavy-lidded and narrow, mouth always on the verge of some private joke. He was dressed in layered black robes with crimson trim, a blade sheathed at his back like an afterthought, and he was staring at Kairos. No words, no greeting, just that unreadable smile. Kairos cleared his throat. "Reporting for duty, Commander, though, full honesty, I wasn't given a choice." Still nothing. "I'm told I'm to be your new aide," Kairos added. "I assume the last one is no longer with us?" Ren blinked slowly. "He was promoted." Kairos lifted an eyebrow. "Ah, and I suppose I'm being punished with upward mobility?" The smile flickered. Not cruel, not kind, just sharp, like a blade too polished to reflect light. "Sit," Ren said finally. Kairos sat, trying not to fidget. The silence stretched. An hour passed, then another. Ren said nothing. He occasionally shuffled papers, hummed under his breath, made notes Kairos couldn't read upside down, but mostly he just watched. By the third hour, Kairos was sure of two things. Ren Ashtar either didn't want an aide, or he was trying to make him run first. Unfortunately, Kairos was stubborn. Still, by sunset, he'd nearly chewed through the hem of his sleeve. "Do you usually test people like this?" he asked. "Or am I a special case?" Ren didn't answer. Instead, he handed Kairos a scroll. "Deliver this to the Emperor's council chamber before the second bell." Kairos stood too fast. "Right? Orders, something I understand." He left in a hurry, grateful for motion, anything to escape those damned eyes. As he passed through the gilded corridors, he broke the seal to confirm the message. Ren hadn't told him not to. It was a routine battle update, except for one line. "Execute the captured border rebels publicly to set an example." Kairos stopped mid-hall. "No," he whispered. "This is wrong." He scanned it again. There were 11 captured men, but 7 of them had already been pardoned by Emperor Jian last week. The message had missed the update. Delivering it as is could spark unnecessary bloodshed, and worse, political backlash. Kairos made a decision, one that could get him exiled. He ran. Bursting into the council chamber mid-meeting, he startled 5 ministers, spilled a bit of ink, and ignored the snide voice of Prince Yuan sneering, "Has the servant come to perform a trick?" Kairos strode to the head scribe and handed over a revised scroll. "There's a correction in the 6th line," he said breathlessly. "It contradicts a royal pardon issued on the 12th. I'll accept the blame for altering the original, but I won't let innocent blood spill over bad record-keeping. Murmurs rose. One minister narrowed his eyes. Another glared. But the emperor, seated above them all in gold and emeralds, looked intrigued. "Who are you?" he asked. Kairos bowed low. "No one important, your majesty. Just literate." The council erupted in muffled laughter. "Where did you find this one?" the emperor asked. From the shadows near the side doors, a figure stepped forward. Ren Ashtar. "Exactly where he was supposed to be," Ren said, voice smooth. "Correcting mistakes, including mine." Kairos turned to him, stunned. Ren's eyes met his. His mouth twitched in something that looked like real amusement. The meeting ended soon after. The matter of the scroll settled. Outside, in the twilight glow of the palace steps, Kairos caught up to Ren. "You let me deliver a false message just to see what I'd do," he accused. "I did. You could have told me it was a test." "I could have." Kairos narrowed his eyes. "So was this all just fun for you?" Ren looked at him, not through him. At him. "No," he said. "This was interesting." Kairos didn't know whether to be offended or honored, probably both. Ren added, "You did well." Kairos blinked. "That was a compliment." Ren tilted his head. "A rare one." "Well," Kairos muttered, brushing past him, "enjoy it while it lasts. I plan to keep this strictly professional from now on." He walked away quickly, cheeks warm, jaw tight. Behind him, Ren smiled again, and this time, he didn't hide it. Chapter 2. This was supposed to be an assignment, not a seduction. Kairos hadn't even unpacked his satchel when he was informed, quite unceremoniously, that he would be relocating. "To the Shadow Wing," the steward said, nose wrinkled like he'd smelled something sour. "The what now?" Kairos asked, blinking at the tightly rolled parchment bearing the imperial seal. "The private residence of Commander Ren Ashtar, by order of His Majesty, for security reasons." The steward replied, already turning on his heel as though the conversation bored him to death. Kairos stood frozen, still clutching the parchment. "You mean to say I'm moving into his wing?" The steward didn't respond. He simply waved a hand in the air as if dismissing a fly. Kairos stared at the empty corridor. "Wonderful," he muttered. "Nothing says professional boundaries like forced cohabitation with a war criminal in silk robes." The Shadow Wing was eerily silent. The floor tiles gleamed, every corner pristine, but there was a distinct absence of life. No servants bustling about, no scribes, no courtiers fluttering their fans. Just silence, and the scent of sandalwood. His new quarters were modest. A small sitting room, a writing desk, and a sleeping pallet. The walls were bare except for one lacquered screen, depicting a mountain range so detailed it almost breathed. He didn't even have time to explore when a bell rang. A soft chime. Distant. Dinner, apparently. Kairos followed the sound into a side room lit with low lanterns and an overly large dining table, long enough to seat 10. At the far end sat Ren Ashtar, already sipping from a black porcelain cup. "Didn't realize we were doing candlelight suppers," Kairos muttered, taking the opposite seat. Ren set his cup down. "Security is tighter when my staff sleeps in the same wing," the Emperor insisted. Kairos rolled his eyes. "Sure. Security. Not surveillance." Their meal was quiet, too quiet. Ren didn't eat much. He sipped broth and watched Kairos pick at dumplings like he was memorizing the pattern of his chewing. Kairos shifted. "Is this going to be a recurring theme? You staring at me like I'm a puzzle or a spy?" "I haven't decided which you are yet," Ren said, sipping again. Kairos choked on a piece of cabbage. "You're joking." "I rarely do." After dinner, Kairos made the mistake of taking his dishes to the kitchen himself, habit from years of working among the scribes. He returned to his quarters, placed the tray on the desk, and heard a splash. The bathhouse, he remembered. The Shadow Wing had one. He was just going to wash his face. He opened the door, stepped into the steam, and froze. There, standing in the middle of the room with a towel slung casually over one shoulder, hair damp and glistening in the lamplight, was Ren. Bare-chested, robes loosened, skin pale and smooth but scarred in places, lines that spoke of knives and battles. Kairos couldn't imagine. Ren turned slowly. "You look scandalized." Kairos dropped the tray. "Porcelain shattered." "I know, I was just—" he stammered, turning away so fast he nearly tripped on the hem of his own robes. "I didn't think— no one told me." Ren chuckled, low and amused. "You'll have to get used to this if we're to share a wing." "I'll bathe at midnight," Kairos muttered, backing out the door like he was escaping a duel. "Suit yourself." Later that night, he was reading through a stack of political edicts, mostly mundane, when a note slid under his door, in clean, blocky handwriting. Meeting. Midnight. West Hall. No seal. No signature. Kairos stared at it for a full minute. "This is how assassinations begin," he muttered, and yet he tucked the note into his sleeve. The West Hall was older, built before the new wing. Candles flickered against ancient brickwork. When he arrived, he found a small group gathered. 4 men, all in cloaks, all high-ranking. And Wren at the center, his robe now fully fastened. One of the men scowled. "He shouldn't be here." Wren glanced at Kairos. "He's already here. Let's continue." The meeting was a strategy discussion. Not war exactly, but something close. Border tensions, royal spies gone missing, movements within the council. Wren guided the conversation with an ease that both impressed and unsettled Kairos. His mind was terrifying. When the conversation hit a lull, disagreement over how to intercept a caravan suspected of smuggling illegal texts, Kairos hesitated, then stepped forward. "If you intercept them openly, it'll cause diplomatic insult," he said. "But if you bribe one of the caravan's handlers to switch the cargo route, you can seize the contraband without being seen. Quiet. Clean." The room went silent. One of the older men scoffed. "You presume too much." Wren raised a hand. "Let him speak." Kairos met his eyes. "You're planning this like a battle. It's not. It's theater. If you don't care how it ends, at least care how it looks." The other men grumbled but eventually nodded. Strategy was strategy. When the meeting dispersed, Wren caught up to Kairos in the corridor. "You're more dangerous than you look," he said quietly. Kairos gave him a sharp look. Was that supposed to be flattery or a threat? Wren leaned closer. Close enough that Kairos could feel the warmth of his breath near his ear. Both. Kairos' heart jolted. He shoved Wren gently back, palm on his chest. "Don't." Wren caught his wrist. His hand was warm, steady. His fingers lingered just long enough to feel the tremble in Kairos' pulse. "You're trembling," Wren said, almost amused. "I'm furious," Kairos hissed. "You don't get to test me like this." "I'm not one of your pawns." Wren's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. Like recognition. He let go. Kairos stepped back. "I'm not here for this. I'm here to work, to serve, and you smile like you want something that isn't loyalty." He turned and walked away before Wren could respond. The next day brought chaos. Word had spread somehow that Kairos had attended the midnight meeting. Prince Yuan confronted him in the Eastern Gardens. "My dear scribe," Yuan said, fanning himself lazily, "I heard you've been invited to whisper with shadows now." Kairos stiffened. "My position is none of your concern." "Oh, but you concern me greatly," Yuan said, stepping closer. His silk robes shimmered in the sun, gold threads glittering like a net. "You have such an expressive mouth. I wonder what it says when it's not correcting people." Kairos tried to step back. The prince's hand caught his elbow, and then, without warning, the hand was gone. Wren stood behind them, quiet as a ghost. His smile was razor-thin. "Prince Yuan," he said, voice smooth but lethal, "I suggest you redirect your attention elsewhere." Yuan laughed, nervous. "Ah, the Emperor's faithful dog. Always protecting something." Wren didn't answer, just stepped slightly between them. Kairos opened his mouth, then closed it. Yuan retreated with an exaggerated bow. Later, in the safety of his quarters, Kairos sat at his desk, gripping the edge so hard his knuckles whitened. Wren stood in the doorway. "You didn't need to do that," Kairos said. "You looked uncomfortable." "I'm always uncomfortable around vipers." Wren stepped inside. "Yuan is more peacock than snake." "That doesn't make him harmless." They were quiet for a moment, then Kairos added softly, "I don't need saving. Not from him. Not from anyone." Wren's voice was barely a whisper. "Not even from me?" Kairos stood, walked over, looked him in the eye. I haven't decided about yet." And before Wren could answer, he closed the door between them, slowly, deliberately. On the other side, Wren smiled again, and this time, it wasn't for amusement. Chapter 3. I'm not jealous. I just don't like you looking at anyone but me. The invitation came sealed in red lacquer and stitched with gold thread, an unmistakable mark of imperial command. "A dinner," Wren said, laying the scroll across Kairos' desk that morning. "The Emperor wants to see the court aligned on trade sanctions." Kairos glanced at the parchment. "And you want me there? Why? To eavesdrop? Whisper snide commentary while you smile like you're planning a coup?" Wren's mouth twitched. "You have sharper eyes than most ministers." and a less expensive wardrobe. Ren looked him over slowly, like he was already picturing what Kairos might look like dressed properly. "I'll have something tailored," Kairos groaned. "I hate you," Ren smiled. "You'll look exquisite." By evening, the palace's east pavilion was bathed in lantern light and soft perfume. Cherrywood screens shimmered with candle reflections, and courtiers draped themselves in silk like predators ready to pounce. Kairos stood just outside the doors, dressed in a dark crimson robe with silver trim. The fabric clung to his lean frame, the wide collar exposing a hint of his collarbone. His hair, for once, was combed back and tied with a satin cord. He tugged at the sleeves awkwardly. "I look ridiculous." "You look," Ren said from behind him, voice lower than usual, like a man who should be feared. Kairos turned. Ren was already watching him. There was something different in his expression. Gone was the amused, knowing smirk. For a heartbeat, his gaze darkened with something raw and unreadable. Then it was gone, replaced with the usual calm. He offered his arm. Kairos rolled his eyes but took it. "You're insufferable." "And you," Ren said, leading him through the threshold, "are late." Inside, the dining hall buzzed with political tension dressed as laughter. Ministers reclined in ornate cushions. Lady Leon sipped from a long glass, her kohl-lined eyes tracking every move like a cat at a ball. And at the head of the table sat Prince Yuan, draped in gold and smugness. "Kairos," Yuan purred, rising to greet them. "You've traded ink stains for silk, a remarkable transformation." Kairos bowed stiffly. "Your Highness." "You've brought him as a date?" Yuan asked, gaze sliding to Ren. Ren smiled. "I don't bring pawns to dinner." Kairos nearly choked. "Am I a knight, then, or just the board you all play on?" The table chuckled. They took their seats. Ren beside the Emperor, Kairos beside Prince Yuan, unfortunately. Through the courses, Kairos tried to focus on the conversation. Grain tariffs, outer province tensions, funding for new irrigation channels, but Yuan kept interrupting. Leaning too close, whispering things he thought were charming. "Tell me," the prince murmured over wine, "do you enjoy your position? Working under someone so powerful?" Kairos shifted. "I enjoy working under someone who listens," Yuan chuckled. "But does he listen to your mind, or your mouth?" Kairos stared at him. "You really think you're subtle." "Not trying to be. I'm trying to be irresistible." Across the table, Ren's smile never wavered, but his eyes had gone cold. Kairos could feel them, watching, measuring. By dessert, the air was thick with tension. Even the Emperor noticed. "Commander," Jian said lightly, "you've gone quiet." "I'm simply enjoying the spectacle, Your Majesty," Ren replied, swirling his cup. The wine in his hand didn't tremble, but Kairos saw the faint pressure in his jaw. Later, as guests dispersed and music played softly from the far alcove, Kairos slipped away. He found a quiet hallway lined with paper lanterns and exhaled. He didn't hear Ren approach, but he felt him. A hand closed around his wrist. Kairos turned sharply. "What?" "Be careful who you let touch you," Ren said. Voice low. "Controlled. Dangerous." Kairos yanked his arm back. "You're not my handler." "No," Ren said. "But Yuan doesn't flirt. He lays traps." Kairos laughed bitterly. "Are you jealous?" "I don't get jealous," Ren said. Kairos stepped forward, their chests almost touching. "Then what is this? Possessiveness? Paranoia?" Ren leaned down until their faces were inches apart. "I don't like being watched when I want something I can't have." Kairos's breath caught. He wanted to slap him. Or kiss him. Maybe both. Instead, he whispered, "Then stop looking." Ren didn't move. Didn't kiss him. Didn't walk away. The tension broke only when Kairos turned on his heel and stormed back toward the training courtyard. 15 minutes later, Ren followed. Kairos was already in the training ring, stripping off his outer robe and tossing it onto the railing. Beneath it, he wore the thinner inner tunic, loose enough for movement, but clinging in the wrong places. He grabbed a wooden practice sword. "You came," Kairos said, not looking at him. Ren picked up another blade. "You called me jealous." "You didn't deny it." They circled each other. Kairos struck first, too fast, too angry. Ren parried easily. Again, again. The sounds of wood meeting wood echoed through the air. Sparks of movement, tension bleeding into every swing. "You think you can manipulate everyone." Kairos snapped between blows. "You smile like you already know how it ends." "I usually do," Ren replied calmly. "Not with me. Especially with you." Their swords locked. Faces close. Kairos's lip curled in challenge. Then Ren twisted, swept his leg, and Kairos fell hard, back hitting the mat, breath gone. Ren followed, pinned him. Kairos struggled, furious. "Get off me." But Ren didn't move. His legs straddled Kairos's hips, hands braced on either side of his head, their breaths mixed. Kairos's heart thudded in his ears. "Tell me to stop," Ren said. Kairos looked up at him, really looked, saw the restraint trembling in his muscles, the desire held back like a flood behind glass. He didn't say a word. Ren's gaze flickered, searching his face for an answer. Then, slowly, he released him, stood, offered no explanation. Kairos sat up, breath still ragged. "You don't trust yourself." Ren didn't answer. "Or is it me you don't trust?" Kairos asked. Ren turned his back. "My entire family was slaughtered by men who smiled while shaking hands. You learn not to trust." Kairos froze. The silence between them felt like the last breath before a cliff fall. Ren added, quietly, "I was 12. They burned the estate while I hid beneath the floorboards. I listened to my mother scream." Kairos stood slowly. "That's why you serve the Emperor," Ren nodded. "He saved me. I owe him everything." Kairos stepped closer. "Even your heart?" Ren's smile was bitter. "That was taken long ago." Kairos reached out, stopped himself, then let his fingers brush Ren's sleeve. "You act like you're untouchable," he said, "but I think you're just afraid someone might actually want to." For the first time, Ren didn't smile. He just looked, lost. And Kairos, standing in the quiet aftermath, didn't say another word. He simply walked away, leaving Ren alone in the courtyard, with nothing but the truth Kairos had seen too clearly. Chapter 4. He protects the Emperor, but I think he'd kill for me. The scroll in Kairos's hand was still warm from the courier's grip when the explosion ripped through the corridor. It wasn't fire that tore the air. It was pressure, concussive and cruel, a blast of force that cracked the plaster walls and flung Kairos back into a marble pillar. He crumpled to the floor, vision spinning, scroll fluttering beside him like a discarded wing. Shouts echoed through the palace. Guards scrambled. Somewhere nearby, a woman screamed. Kairos coughed once. Blood bloomed at the corner of his mouth. His ears rang. The world dimmed at the edges. Then came the pounding footsteps, heavy, fast, precise. And then Ren. He dropped to his knees beside him, black robes whipping like smoke. His hands were uncharacteristically rough, tugging at Kairos's shoulders, checking his chest, his neck, his skull. "Kairos," he barked, "answer me." Kairos blinked slowly. "I'm fine," he rasped. "You're bleeding. Small price to pay for royal paperwork." Ren exhaled sharply, half fury, half relief, and lifted him as though he weighed nothing. One arm hooked under Kairos's knees, the other behind his back. Kairos groaned. "You don't have to." "I do," Ren snapped. He carried him through the palace with the speed of a storm held together only by purpose. Servants fled from his path. Soldiers saluted without daring to look too long. Back in the Shadow Wing, Ren placed Kairos gently onto the bed, then turned to the guards. "Double the posts. No one enters this wing without my explicit permission. Not even the Emperor." "Yes, Commander," they barked. Ren shut the door behind them. The room was quiet, still filled with the scent of Kairos's ink, his books, his stubbornness. Ren stood there for a long time, unmoving, before sitting in the chair beside the bed. Kairos drifted into a dreamless sleep. When he woke, it was deep into the night. The moon carved silver lines across the floor. A candle burned low in the far corner. Ren sat by the bed, still as a statue, watching. Kairos blinked. "You're still here." Ren's voice was cold, clipped. "You could have died." Kairos tried to sit up, winced. Not exactly a comforting bedtime story. "You were targeted," Ren said. "Not caught in crossfire. Targeted. The package was meant for you." Kairos stilled. "But why? I'm a scribe." "You're my scribe," Ren said, and the implication in those words struck harder than the blast. For a moment they sat in silence. Then Kairos reached out, fingers brushing against Ren's jaw, a small touch, barely there, but it landed like thunder. "I'm here," Kairos whispered. "You don't have to sit vigil like I'm about to vanish." Ren's breath hitched. His hand covered Kairos's, holding it to his face. "I've watched men die for less than what you know," he murmured. Kairos didn't look away. "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of not mattering when I live." Ren's eyes darkened. "I won't let anyone touch you," he said. "Not again." By morning, the entire court knew what had happened. Whispers of attempted assassination flooded the palace halls. Most thought the blast had been meant for Ren or the Emperor. No one expected the target to be a low-born advisor. Except Ren. He stormed into the royal chamber like an avalanche in silk. The Emperor straightened. "Commander?" "It was Yuan," Ren said. The court went silent. Prince Yuan stood near the window, golden and smug as ever. "Excuse me?" "You've wanted Kairos removed from my side since the moment he embarrassed you," Ren said. "And you have access to the couriers. I checked." "I flirted with your favorite toy, Ren. That's hardly motive for murder." Ren's smile turned venomous. "You overestimate your charm and underestimate how close you are to exile." He stepped closer, drawing to full height, voice turning to frost. "If you so much as breathe near him again, I will not be responsible for what happens." The Emperor rose, hand raised. "Enough!" Silence fell again. "Ren," the Emperor said softly, "you forget yourself." "I remember too well," Ren replied. The room crackled with tension. Then a new voice broke through. "Commander, Kairos." Still pale, still limping, but standing. "Let it go," he said, voice calm. "You've made your point." Ren didn't move at first, but slowly his fists unclenched. Yuan's smirk returned. How charming! The wounded little assistant calling off the hound. Kairos turned to him with a deceptively mild smile. "You should consider your own relevance, Your Highness. If you were half as useful as you are decorative, perhaps Ren wouldn't have to speak for both of us." Yuan's smile faltered. "Just enough." Later that evening, the garden was quiet. Lanterns flickered over carved stone paths and trees heavy with summer bloom. Kairos sat on a bench near the koi pond, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Ren found him there. "You're not in bed," he said. Kairos looked up. "I could say the same to you." Ren joined him without asking. They sat in silence, the air humming with crickets and distant harp music. Kairos broke it first. "You're always smiling like you're planning my death." Ren turned to him, expression unreadable. "That's not why I smile." "Then why?" Ren's voice dropped. "Because I want you, and I can't have you." Kairos's chest tightened. "Can't," he echoed. "Or won't." Ren looked away. "The Emperor trusts me because I am predictable, because I love no one and want nothing." Kairos reached over, took Ren's hand in his. "Then maybe you should want something. Just once." Ren stared at their joined hands. "I do," he said. "I want you." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But their fingers stayed locked. And in that fragile stillness, something began to shift. Something neither power nor politics could undo. Chapter 5. This was never about loyalty, was it? The palace air thickened with tension as if the walls themselves had begun to listen more intently than usual. Whispers flared like oil to flame. The Emperor's shadow is compromised. The scribe's too close to the blade. Seduction, manipulation, treason. Kairos heard them all. He heard them as he walked through the great hall, his sandals quiet against polished marble lack, as dozens of eyes tracked him with equal parts disdain and curiosity. The summons had arrived at dawn, curt and ominous. "You are to answer before His Majesty at once." He didn't know what the accusation was, but he could guess. When he stepped into the chamber, General Mahir was already there. Tall, hawk-eyed, dressed in stiff brocade lined with medals that gleamed like accusations. Mahir had always hated Ren. Kairos had simply been the newest blade he could use to pierce him. "You honor us, Kairos," Mahir drawled. "Such an early hour for scandal." Kairos kept his expression neutral. "I've found scandal doesn't care for scheduling." The Emperor sat beneath a silk canopy, robes immaculate, expression unreadable. Lady Leon stood to one side, draped in lavender, her fan covering most of her face, but not her eyes. Her gaze was sharp, supportive, waiting. "State your charges," Jian said. Mahir stepped forward with slow, deliberate grace. "This court is under the impression," he said, voice rich with mock regret, "that the Emperor's shadow, Commander Ren Ashtar, has allowed a member of his personal staff to unduly influence matters of strategy and policy. That this attachment," he glanced at Kairos, "has compromised national security." "You're accusing me of what exactly?" Kairos asked. "Treason," a beat of silence. The Emperor tilted his head. "And what evidence do you offer?" "Letters," Mahir said, smug now. "Intercepted correspondence. Glances observed. Meetings in the gardens late at night. It doesn't take a tactician to see what's happening. He's using the commander's desire to place himself above his station." Kairos stepped forward. "You mean he listens to me? That's your proof." Mahir smiled like a man already certain of victory. "And does he take you to bed, scribe?" The words landed like a slap. Kairos's voice was steady. "No. But even if he did, how does a man's heart make him less loyal?" The Emperor did not speak. The silence roared. Then the doors opened, and Ren walked in. His robes were darker than usual, black with blood-red trim. His sword was strapped to his back, but he carried no documents. No defense, only certainty. He walked to the center of the hall and removed the silver badge of the Emperor's shadow from his chest, and dropped it to the floor. It rang out like a bell. "If his presence is treason," Ren said, calm but clear, "then let me fall with him." The court exploded into gasps and whispers. The Emperor's face didn't change, but his knuckles tightened on the armrest. "Commander." "I won't deny it," Ren said, voice like silk over steel. "I value him. I trust him. I need him. If that makes me unfit to serve, then I will walk away from the blade you gave me." Mahir scoffed. "So you admit it. You're compromised." Ren's smile was thin and lethal. "No, I'm in love." Gasps again. A few ministers stood, scandalized. Mahir's mouth opened, then closed. Lady Lian snapped her fan open. "Finally," she said under her breath. The Emperor closed his eyes for a long moment, then opened them again. "Lady Lian?" She stepped forward, eyes cool. "The letters were not intercepted. They were forged. The meetings were authorized, and I personally verified the scribe's discretion. If the court cannot separate affection from disloyalty, then we have larger problems." The Emperor looked at Kairos, then Ren, then back. "You will both be cleared," he said slowly. "But your relationship ends here, publicly at least. Ren remains under my command. Kairos will be reassigned away from military matters." Ren didn't move. Understood. Kairos lowered his head. "Yes, Your Majesty." They didn't speak until the corridor emptied, footsteps fading like retreating waves. Kairos stood near one of the stained glass windows, arms crossed tightly over his chest. Ren stood a few feet away, expression guarded. "You shouldn't have said that," Kairos whispered. "You shouldn't have thrown your badge." "I meant every word." "I know. That's what terrifies me." Ren's voice softened. "You're not safe here anymore." Kairos looked up, throat tight. "So what, you're sending me away?" "It's not exile, it's distance. Enough to quiet the court. Enough to protect you." "Enough to protect you, you mean?" Ren said nothing. Kairos stepped forward. "You say you love me, but you won't fight for me to stay." "I am fighting," Ren said. "I'm just not winning this one with swords." Kairos stared at him for a long, aching second, then nodded once. "I'll leave tonight," he said. Ren looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He only whispered, "Be safe." Night fell fast. The scribe chambers were mostly empty by the time Kairos returned. He packed slowly, mechanically. A few books, a sealed scroll, his robes. The place smelled of ink and paper, and something warm he couldn't name. He lingered by the desk, running his fingers over the gouge in the corner where he'd once slammed it in frustration. He let himself sit, let himself feel. The door creaked. Ren stood there, framed in shadow, eyes unreadable. "You're still here," he said. Kairos didn't look up. "I thought you'd be watching from the walls like some dramatic ghost." Ren walked forward, stopped just shy of the desk. "You told me not to fall in love with you," he said. Kairos finally looked at him. "I'm not very obedient," he said softly. Then he stood. Their bodies collided in a rush, Ren's hands on Kairos's face, Kairos's arms around Ren's neck. The kiss was not delicate. It was hungry, desperate. Months of restraint unraveling in seconds. Clothes were discarded without ceremony. Silk fell like petals on the floor. The desk trembled under their weight before they moved to the bed. They didn't speak much, only the language of touch and breath. Ren pressed his lips to Kairos's throat, his chest, his shoulder, like trying to memorize him by taste. Kairos whispered confessions between sighs. "I wanted this since the first time you smiled like you knew me." "You scared me," Ren whispered, "because you saw too much." "You let me in," Kairos whispered back. "Now I'm not leaving." They tangled under the sheets, limbs entwined, skin against skin, laughter between kisses, fingers trembling, healing. When the candle finally burned out, they were still there, wrapped in each other, not warriors, not pawns, just them. Chapter 6. He smiles like a monster, but kisses me like a man in love. 1 month passed and everything changed. And yet, in the private spaces behind palace walls, some things remained exactly the same. Ren's position as the Emperor's shadow had been reinstated, quietly, without fanfare, but undeniably. His badge returned, his sword re-sanctioned, his place at the Emperor's right hand restored like a blade back into its sheath. But rumors had changed their shape. The whispers now didn't mock. They trembled. Because when Ren had chosen a scribe over the court's approval, something inside the palace shifted, like an old lock snapping open. Everyone felt it, especially when he refused the emperor. It happened in open court. Emperor Jian, eyes sharp and expression unreadable, turned to Ren mid-council and asked, "You know I rely on you more than anyone. The Northern Territories have offered a match, a princess. The alliance would be useful. Will you consider it?" Ren didn't pause. Didn't even blink, no. A beat. Jian leaned back. "You refuse an imperial proposal?" "I refuse to bind myself where I feel nothing," Ren said evenly. "I've spent too long pretending duty should drown desire." Jian stared at him, then nodded once. "So be it." The court erupted in murmurs, but no one challenged him. Not this time. Kairos, meanwhile, had climbed without asking to. Promoted to Royal Policy Advisor, a position once reserved for gray-haired scholars with 40 years of experience and half a spine. Now it belonged to a sharp-tongued, ink-stained man with expressive eyes and too much history with the Emperor's shadow. Officially, he worked under the Chancellor. Unofficially, he still sat beside Ren during most meetings, still whispered sharp corrections when ministers lied, still caught flaws in reports before they reached the Emperor's hands, still watched Ren. And Ren, in turn, still smiled at him like he'd been starving for years, and finally tasted something he didn't want to lose. It was almost peaceful, until General Mahir struck. The coup came at dusk, as the lanterns were being lit and the guards were switching shifts. Perfect timing. Calculated. Mahir was many things. Coward wasn't one of them. He struck at the heart of the palace. Loyalists infiltrated the inner courts. Scribes were locked inside their rooms. 2 counselors were taken hostage. The Emperor was rushed to his private vault. Kairos had been on his way to the archives when it happened. He heard the first scream before the sword was drawn. A soldier, one of Mahir's, lunged at him. Kairos ducked, barely avoiding the blade, and ran. He fled through corridors he barely remembered learning, heart pounding, lungs burning. But they knew the palace better. They cornered him in the eastern wing, backs against the old carved columns that overlooked the training courtyard. 3 men, all armed, smiling. "Pretty thing," one of them said. "Heard the commander keeps you close. Let's see what makes you so special." Kairos raised his chin. "You'll have to kill me first." "Oh," said another, "we will." A flash of steel. And then, a blur of black and crimson tore through the men like wind slicing through silk. Ren, sword drawn, robes streaked with blood, eyes on fire. The first man fell before he could blink. The second didn't get the chance to swing. The third turned to run, but Ren caught him by the back of the neck and slammed him against the wall. Silence followed. Kairos exhaled shakily. Ren turned to him, chest heaving. "You're hurt?" Kairos shook his head. "No, just shaken." Ren stepped forward, wiped his sword clean without taking his eyes off him. "You are the only thing in this palace I won't lose," he said, voice low. Rough. Kairos stared at him, words caught in his throat, and then Ren staggered. "Ren!" Kairos lunged, catching him before he fell. Blood seeped from beneath his sash. "I'm fine," Ren mumbled. "You're bleeding. You're safe, that's enough." "No, it isn't," Kairos whispered. "You are not expendable." He half-carried, half-dragged Ren back to the Shadow Wing, doors bolted behind them. A healer arrived, courtesy of Lady Lion, who somehow knew everything without being told. Stitches, salves, antidotes for whatever poison Mahir's blade had been laced with. Then, finally, they were alone. Ren laid back against the silk pillows of their shared bed, shirt half-buttoned, skin pale but steady. His sword leaned against the bed frame. His fingers rested lightly against Kairos's. Kairos lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. "I thought I lost you," he said. "You didn't," Ren murmured. "I followed your voice." Kairos turned on his side, studying the curve of Ren's cheek, the faint shadows beneath his eyes. "You always smiled like you wanted something," he whispered. Ren's lips curved faintly. "I did." "What was it?" Ren looked at him, really looked, eyes softer than Kairos had ever seen. "I wanted you to choose me," he said, without being ordered to. Kairos didn't answer. He kissed him instead, slow, deep, certain. The kiss wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate like the first time, or fearful like the second. It was home. The kind of kiss that says, "You're real, and you're mine, and I don't care who knows it anymore." Ren pulled him close. Their bodies fit together like puzzle pieces long scattered. They kissed again, and again. Kairos laughed into his mouth, breathless. You still taste like danger. And you, Ren murmured against his throat, still taste like the best mistake I ever made. Kairos grinned, eyes bright. Then he shoved Ren gently onto his back, climbing over him, hands on either side of his face. Ren blinked up at him. Kairos kissed his forehead, his jaw, the corner of his mouth. Then let's write our own rules, he whispered. No more hiding. Ren smiled, finally unguarded. No more fear. Just us. Kairos leaned down and kissed him again, slower this time, as if to seal a promise. Outside the room, the palace roared back to life. Soldiers reclaimed the halls. The Emperor restored order. Mahir was arrested, silenced, exiled. But none of it touched the stillness within their walls. Only the flicker of lanterns remained, casting two dancing shadows across the silk-screened panels. No longer hiding, no longer pretending. Just two men who had survived everything, by choosing each other.